I do want to move on. Leah, we're meeting kind of for the first time live here in front of everyone, but I want to welcome you and just give you the floor to share, whatever you would like to share about this issue, about your story. I know you're located in Utah.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank
All
you.
right, great. I think the very first thing that I want to say is thank you so much to all of you who are doing anything. Even if it feels small, even if it feels like we're holding back some kind of tsunami, that everything that you do to protect a child does matter. And that's something that I feel, of course, all of us feel so strongly about. But Meg, your book is on my desk. I mean, Danielle, you were there from the moment that the press got a hold of my family's story, setting things straight. I just want to say thank you to everyone who is working so diligently. And it's true, this is not highlighted the way that it should be. I'm Om's mom. I live just north of Salt Lake City, Utah, and I will tell you, this can happen to anyone. I constantly have to remind people I am an Ivy League educated medical professional, and I direct a large women's health component of a huge healthcare organization. And it does not matter how many degrees you have. In fact, actually, sometimes that's even to your detriment, as has been mentioned. But 2 years ago on Mother's Day in 2023, Om was murdered by his dad, who then turned the gun on himself. So many of us have eerily similar stories. He was killed by a gun that was bought from a pawn shop just a few blocks away from the courthouse where I fought for over a decade to keep my kids safe. And as has been mentioned also, these instinctive protective behaviors that we have as protective parents to document, to warn, they're usually cataloged and criminalized as high conflict, as custodial interference, as parental alienation, as what happened in my case over and over again. And, my kids' voices were drowned out by hearings, mediation, and mandates. In public, Ohm's dad maintained the image of a professional psychologist, which was very effective and beneficial in his part. So oftentimes, the abuser does appear so incredibly professional and high influence, charismatic, as they often are. But privately, of course, it was a lifetime of incest, solicitation, systematic sexual assault, coercive control, embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion, the whole thing. And every single thing that I brought up, it was not listened to. In fact, I even had, a journal of his where he wrote that he was a sex addict and a child molester. I submitted that as evidence, and it was in his own handwriting, like not an email, not AI produced. It was written in his own handwriting, and it was totally ignored. In fact, turned around against me that I was, of course, alienating. So I think, when you live under the threat of murder, um, even if it's not overt every single day, those exact words, like Kathy mentioned, so many of us don't have a black eye and a broken arm. Strangulation often does not leave marks, but living under constant surveillance, as so many of us have, you feel owned. In fact, that's what I was told. I own you. You'll never survive without me. So, much of this story, I think, is so similar, and we could compare so many details, but it's that impossible choice of, do you live with your children under crushing abuse, or do you try to break free? And this is where we all start to co-parent, not necessarily with the abuser, but we co-parent with the court system. We co-parent with child protective services. We're co-parenting with law enforcement. And co-parenting does not mean that it's going well and that there's, equal parenting. It's just that you have to live your life so publicly with so many systems. And then also many of us have to survive on public assistance, which is a real weight to so many of our systems. Um, and that high conflict label, can be, deadly. So I think that I would say, I was so extremely grateful to the National Safe Parents Organization, to the National Family Violence Law Center. A year before Om was murdered, or at least 6 months before, I approached lawmakers after hearing about Kayden's law. It was 2022. It had just passed earlier that year. Said, we need to have this in our state, please. I went directly to the Judiciary Committee, and it was ignored. And then the next year, then we had, an example. And I also, like Kathy, didn't mean for it to be named after Om, but in some ways personifying this is, in some ways, it's the only way to help people understand who don't have experience with this, or else who just can't wrap their head around filicide. But it is real. Children are being murdered, and then what are we doing about the children who are living in this? There's, in fact, I feel like almost sometimes there's like too much press about kids who have died, and not enough about those who are suffering every single day. And I guess I just want to say thank you also to our Domestic Violence Coalition. They were important partners. I know that that's not the case in every state, but we had a very, very strong, fast movement through our super short legislative session. We have a really short session in Utah, and we were able to pass all the protections in Kayden's law, improvements, mandating child safety first, limiting expert testimony, allowing only safe therapies, and then educating judiciary. But I will say implementation is proving much more difficult than actually even passing the law. So that's where we all need to continue to work together.